Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on the workshop today, and especially a welcome to those of you for whom this is the first workshop, hopefully the first of many that you attend. We've got quite a lot of slides lined up, but we're not going to go through every one of them. Really what this is a summary of a larger report that we produce every quarter. So we're going to be taking highlights from that. And we're going to be reading out some of the key messages from each section of the report, and we're going to present some data from each of those sections. So we'll do a selection of slides, but if anyone at the end in the Q&A wants us to revisit any section, then there are other slides and charts that we can delve into if the occasion demands it. But it is going to be quite a speedy canter through the content of this presentation, but as ever, the full report will be available, and you can always look back at a recording of this workshop if you want to dwell on any particular slide and look into it in detail. So I won't say too much about the background to the report because Charlotte has already mentioned that up front. But what I'm going to do is start by giving some key messages about the labour market from data that we've collected over the last quarter. So we're going to start with some big picture stuff. And I guess that the big picture really, if we start with the state of the economy, is that in the first quarter of the year, business conditions remained weak in the first quarter, but slightly improved on the quarter before at the end of 2024. And we see that in the business sentiment data that we collect through the quarterly economic survey. So some of the outturns for orders and sales and bookings, some of the numbers that we collect there have improved slightly. But also we see it in the national picture for business investment, for economic output and so on. So there is it's a weak picture, but it is, at least on the basis of the past quarter, improved slightly, although probably too early to say at this point that we're any kind of inflection point in the economy's growth path. We are starting to see some impacts from some of the public policy changes that are coming down the track or have already come on stream for the labour market. And we're thinking in particular here of the changes to national insurance, which have raised labour costs for businesses. We see some evidence there of that impacting recruitment intentions for businesses, and labour costs are cited as one of the top price pressures facing business. And in the last quarter, it was the top price pressure cited by business. So that is starting to feed through into recruitment intentions. But also as well, we've got stuff coming through the pipeline on employment regulations. And the effect of that really is to increase the risk of employment. By broadening the scope of employment regulations, it makes it more likely that an employer would at some point down the line be exposed to, say, an employment tribunal. So there's an increased risk of recruitment. And again, we're starting to see that reflected both in the comments that we collect through the quarterly economic survey and some of the recruitment intention data that we pick up through there as well. But looking at the state of the labour market from a recruitment point of view, looking at the recent history of job advertisements, we can see that hiring activity is mostly weakening, unfortunately. So we will get into the detailed numbers later in the presentation. But across a lot of the economy, what we see is weakening hiring activity. So fewer jobs are being advertised for a number of roles, for the broad sweep of roles across the economy. Also, at a sort of more general level, rates of employment and labour market participation are going in the wrong direction too. So the employment rate for this part of the world has fallen to an 11-year low. And economic inactivity, so labour market non-participation, has risen to a 13-year high. So these are not great numbers that we're seeing, and in the presentation we'll dive into some of the things that are driving that. We continue to see acute skill shortages in certain parts of the economy, particularly engineering, IT, and also buoyant demand for soft skills, so transferable skills that are demanded across a range of roles. And also a persistent theme, unfortunately, that we've picked up in, I think, every one of our reports now, is that job-related training continues to be very weak in terms of the incidence of it, and job-related training among employed residents has fallen to a record low. Having said all of that, there are certain parts of the training world which are experiencing a bit of a boom. So we're seeing an increase in online training. That remains the most popular format, but still many small employers reported no engagement in training or education activities over the past year. So not a great picture there, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail in just a bit. So that's the big picture. I'm now going to dive into the first of the sections that we cover in this presentation, and you can see it in more depth in the report. And that's looking in more detail at employment and labour market participation. So the employment rate in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough fell for the second year in 2024 to 76.5%, which is the lowest in 11 years, even though that remains slightly above the national average. And this decline was accompanied by a rise in economic inactivity, and that's now reached a 13-year high of close to 21%, while the unemployment rate fell. So this was driven by record high numbers of students and individuals with long-term sickness, and student inactivity in particular rose by 1.4 percentage points to 6.7%, and long-term sickness rose by 0.4 percentage points to 5.2%. Employment losses concentrated among those with a disability or work-limited illness. And the largest employment declines were in Cambridge and Peterborough, where inactivity reached record highs. So that's the kind of broad picture, but we're now going to go into some of the data behind those messages. So Hannah, it's over to you to talk us through some of the numbers here.
Okay, so Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's employment rate fell in 2024 for the second year running, and over the 2 years its employment rate has fallen more sharply than across England. Within the region, the sharpest falls in employment have been in the city districts, so among residents of Cambridge and Peterborough. And here the biggest falls in employment have been among one of the lowest skilled occupational groups, so that's elementary, admin and service occupations, and that's also the case across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But at the same time, South Cambridgeshire has bucked the trend with an increase in employment among its residents, particularly among those employed as health and education professionals. But even here, there was a fall in employment as well among those elementary, admin and service occupations. So this slide shows the trend in the percentage of 16 to 64-year-olds who are out of work, broken down by those who are economically inactive. So that's those who are out of work and not actively seeking work. That's the purple bar. And those who are unemployed, that's those who are out of work but actively seeking work, and that's the orange bar. So you can see that the unemployment rate fell in 2024 to 2.7%. And this remains low compared to previous years. However, economic inactivity increased to 20.8%. So that's more than 1 in 5 16 to 64-year-olds out of work and not seeking work. And that's the highest rate for 13 years. And this chart shows trends in reasons for inactivity. So inactivity increased for all reasons in 2024. And the top reasons for inactivity continue to be being a student and long-term sickness, with both of these rising to record highs. Inactivity due to looking after the family or home or retirement before the age of 65 also increased. And both of these have previously been on downward trends in line with increases in funded childcare and the state pension age. So this trend reversed over the past year. And at local authority level, the main reasons for inactivity in 2024 were being a student in Cambridge, East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire, long-term sickness in Fenland and Peterborough, and retirement before the age of 65 in Huntingdonshire. If we could just have a quick look at slide 12. So we've included a case study in our most recent report of how the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority has been helping those excluded from the labour market to enter employment via a funded internship programme. So in 2024, this supported over 100 people, with the majority of those remaining in employment or moving into full-time education after their internship, and almost 3/4 of those remaining with the employer with whom they were matched to. So this has had some very successful outcomes, and we've included more information on this in the report and in the slides if you're interested to find out more later on.
So on to local jobs markets. Now, we're still waiting on data for last year for business demography. So looking in detail at the number of businesses there are against different sectors, because that can give us some important insights about the labour market too. But if we look at the most recent data from the recruitment sites, so from online job advertisements, the most recent data show that in the 6 months to April of this year, job postings fell to their lowest in 4 years. That's 13% below the long-term average and 5% below pre-pandemic levels. And vacancies for science, engineering and technology professionals dropped by 1/3, with job postings for programmers and software developers down 46% in Cambridge alone. The NHS remains the region's top recruiter, and it accounts for almost 6% of all postings. So well over 3,500 unique postings. And that's followed by the University of Cambridge and the global technology company Arm. So, Hannah?
Okay, so this chart shows the trend in the numbers of online job postings across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and these have been falling consistently for over 2 years. So in the 6 months to April 2025, there were almost 64,000 job postings in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which was 5% below the pre-pandemic average. And if we look at job postings by occupation compared to a year ago, 3/4 of the almost 400 occupations saw a fall in job postings, particularly programmers and software developers. Meanwhile, just under 1/4 saw an increase, and those are the biggest increases were all transport occupations, particularly large goods vehicle drivers. And this could be an indicator of more jobs being created or more existing jobs becoming vacant. And this slide here shows the change in job postings in local authority areas in the 6 months to April compared to a year ago. So across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, job postings were down by 20%, which was slightly sharper than the 16% fall across England. Job postings fell by far the sharpest in Cambridge, with a 33% drop. And this was driven by a fall in job postings for programmers and software developers. Elsewhere in the region, job postings fell less sharply than across England and even increased in Finland. And this again could reflect either increased demand or expansion of jobs, or more existing posts becoming vacant. But here, the largest increase in job postings was for transport workers, including large goods vehicle drivers. And this chart here shows occupations with the highest numbers of job postings across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough over the past 6 months. So despite that fall in job postings, programmers and software developers remained the most in-demand occupation, followed by sales-related occupations and care workers and home carers. And at local authority level, programmers and software developers were the most in-demand occupation in Cambridge, sales-related occupations in Peterborough, and care workers and home carers in East Cambridgeshire, Fenland, Huntingdonshire and South Cambridgeshire.
Thanks, Hannah. And just it's worth flagging at this point that within the report itself, we have a lot of detail about recruitment activity at the local authority level. So we haven't spent too much time on it here, but in these tables, which you'll see in the report, we list the top recruiters by local authority area, the top occupations, and the share of those in the overall recruitment mix. So do go to the full report if you're looking for detail on any particular local authority area, because it's all there. So moving on to skills gaps and shortages. So one of the things we look at really closely when we do our analysis is how long it takes for to recruit to a particular occupation, and that gives us some idea of how difficult recruitment is compared to the average. So we can look at whether or not recruitment times have got longer, how they compare to labour market benchmarks, like the average for that sector or for the labour market as a whole. So based on that kind of information, what we can say is that the average time taken to fill a vacancy rose to 26 days in the 6 months to April of this year. And that's after falling to 24 days in early 2024. So this remains well above the pre-pandemic average of 17 days. And we think it reflects more cautious hiring amid economic uncertainty, rising labour costs, and as I mentioned earlier, changes to employment regulations that might increase the jeopardy of getting a hiring decision wrong. So recruitment difficulties were highest for taxation experts. That's 32 days to recruit. Registered special nurses, nurse practitioners, medical and dental technicians, production, factory and assembly supervisors, all have an average posting duration of 31 days. Now, South Cambridgeshire saw the sharpest increase in recruitment difficulties by this measure over the past year, while Cambridge and Peterborough had the longest median posting duration of 27 days. Huntingdonshire experienced recruitment difficulties across the highest number of occupations, so across a whole range of different job types. Local businesses cite shortages of engineers, IT professionals, and as ever, soft and transferable skills. Other common gaps include relevant work experience, poor work ethic, and lack of suitable training or trainers. And so these are the sorts of things we pick up in the surveys of business that we conduct at Chamber. Skills gap density remains highest in hotels and restaurants, information and communication, and wholesale and retail, but with little overall change in incidence since 2019. So Hannah, if I can move on to this slide here.
Yep, so this one shows the average length of time taken to fill a vacancy. So this increased quite sharply during the pandemic, but from early 2022, it started to drop. But over the past 6 months, median posting duration, that's the average number of days that a job posting is active, has edged up slightly, which has perhaps been due to growing economic uncertainty and employers adopting more vigorous recruitment processes due to higher employment costs, such as employer national insurance contributions, and the impending increase in employment rights. An average posting duration also remained 50% higher or longer than before the pandemic, which could reflect a shrinking labour force, creating recruitment difficulties, with more people being economically inactive, and some general economic uncertainty since the pandemic. Okay, and if we look at recruitment difficulties by occupation across the region, measured by median posting duration, vacancies that are taking longest to fill include for taxation experts, a range of health and care workers, including nurses, dental technicians, and care workers and home carers, a range of teaching and childcare occupations, and some transport workers, such as road transport drivers. And here, if we look at recruitment difficulties by local authority area, these are highest in Cambridge for accountants, specialist medical practitioners, and healthcare practice managers, for GPs in East Cambridgeshire, for teaching professionals, childcare workers, and engineering technicians in Fenland, for engineering professionals in Huntingdonshire, estate agents in Peterborough, and production technicians in South Cambridgeshire.
So moving on to some data on education and training. So some key messages: higher education progression and apprenticeship achievements are reaching new highs across the region, but disadvantaged pupils continue to lag, and employment training hits a record low. In 2023-24, average GCSE attainment 8 or A8 scores in Cambridge and Peterborough declined slightly and remain below pre-pandemic levels. Fenland had the fourth lowest A8 score in England, with disadvantaged pupils underperforming in all areas outside Cambridge. The percentage of 19-year-olds attaining a level 2 and level 3 qualification remained below average across the region in 23-24, while attainment rates for disadvantaged 19-year-olds were below the national average in all areas outside Cambridge. Progression to higher education reached a record high in 2023, with 46.7% of 19-year-olds entering higher education. However, only about 24% of disadvantaged young people entered higher education compared to 29% nationally, so a bit of a gap there. Adults of 19 and above year olds entering further education, that participation rose for the fourth consecutive year in 2023-24, but it remained 8.4% below pre-pandemic levels, and participation was lowest in Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire and highest in Peterborough. Now, if we move on to employer training, the share of employees receiving job-related training fell to a record low last year, and Cambridge and East Cambridgeshire were among the 10% of local authority areas nationally with the lowest rates of employer training. So a bit of a negative picture that we're picking up there. But let's go in a bit more into the numbers. So Hannah, if you can take us through this slide here.
Yeah, okay, so this chart here shows the percentage of 16 and 17-year-olds who are NEET. So that's not in education, employment or training. And you can see that this has risen sharply over the past 2 years in line with the national trend, and it's at its highest rate since the earliest year in our data set, which is 2016. So the data suggests that this increase has been due to fewer people, young people in employment rather than fewer in educational training. So while the percentage of 16 and 17-year-olds in education and training, it has fallen over the past 4 years after peaking during the pandemic, but it's still currently higher than before the pandemic. So this suggests that the rise in NEETs, particularly compared to pre-pandemic levels, has been due to a fall in young people in employment and consequently more young people in unemployment and inactivity. So this could be due to a number of reasons, such as fewer job opportunities in a weaker labour market, particularly that fall in lower skilled entry-level jobs that we talked about earlier, or could be due to rising inactivity, for example, due to temporary or long-term sickness or other reasons. And if we just take a look at slide 34, so just a quick run through of the new attainment data at age 19. So in 2023-24, the percentage of 19-year-olds attaining a level 2 qualification across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough remained below the national average, so 82.4% compared to 83.4% across England. And this was due to continued below average attainment rates in Peterborough, Fenland and Huntingdonshire, with Peterborough and Fenland having some of the lowest attainment rates nationally. And like other education measures, disadvantaged young people perform particularly poorly in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough compared to disadvantaged 19-year-olds nationally. And at local authority level, this was the case in all areas outside of Cambridge, even in South Cambridgeshire and East Cambridgeshire, where attainment rates overall were above average. And the picture was also similar for level 3 attainment. So below average attainment overall across the region compared to England, due to below average attainments in all areas outside Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire. And in terms of level 2 to 3 progression, young people with a level 2 were most likely to go on to attain a level 3 qualification in South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge, and less likely than average to progress to level 3 elsewhere, particularly in Fenland and East Cambridgeshire.
So moving on to the first of our 3 kind of focus areas, really, of the report. So we look specifically at digital, green and soft skills. If we look at digital skills and occupations first. So the overall story is that the digital workforce has grown strongly in Cambridge and Peterborough over the medium term, over the last 5 years. And it continues now to occupy a huge space within our labour market. So features really strongly in demand for skills, in the percentage of jobs out there. But there has been a short-term story of a weakening. So the latest data show job postings for digital roles have fallen to a record low amid global shifts in hiring by tech firms. I think that's an important thing to remember here, which is that some of the employers that are most active in this space have global workforces. So some of these decisions about hiring do not reflect necessarily local factors, but national and global ones, particularly global ones too. But starting from the top, we see that basic digital skills, or what we would now regard as basic digital skills, like Microsoft Excel, Office more generally, computer literacy broadly defined, Microsoft Outlook, they remain some of the most requested skills across the region, along with more specialist ones like Python, the programming language. 1 in 11 workers across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are employed in digital occupations, and that is higher than the national average of 1 in 15. And programmers and software development professionals account for nearly 40% of all digital workers and remain the most in demand of occupations. So digital employment has grown quite strongly over the last 5 years by 20%, and that's against a backdrop of a fall in employment for other occupations. But the most recent data show for digital roles, recruitment is now at a record low, with job postings close to 60% below the long-term average compared to 5% below for all other occupations. And this likely reflects a global unwinding of hiring by major tech firms during the COVID pandemic and structural changes in employment driven by technology. So some industry-specific factors, some more broad than that. But despite this, some digital skills represented larger shares of job postings over the past 6 months compared to 5-year averages, including basic digital skills, AI, data analysis, accounting software, and 3D design software. The top recruiters of digital workers in this region include ARM, the University of Cambridge, and the NHS. And according to our most recent survey of business intentions, most local businesses believe that AI will make their businesses more competitive, but only a small percentage believe they are fully equipped with the skills to work with it. So a bit of a gap there between a belief in potential and an ability to unlock it. So we'll just go into some of the details of the data. So Hannah?
Okay, so we've got some new data now on the numbers of people employed in digital occupations, and this continues to show strong growth over the past 5 years, but it does show a fall in digital employment over the past year, in line with job postings data, which has shown that the number of job postings for IT professionals has fallen to a record low. But when looking over the past 5 years, the strongest growth has been in rural areas, while Cambridge has seen a fall in the number of IT professionals. And in terms of sectors, most growth in digital employment has occurred in the manufacturing and professional, scientific and technical activity sectors. But at the same time, employment of IT professionals has fallen in the core information and communication sector. And if we look now at digital skills, so the recent fall in job postings for IT professionals means that many digital skills now represent smaller shares of job postings compared to 5-year averages, particularly programming languages and software engineering, as shown in the chart on the right. However, some represented larger shares, including basic digital skills such as Microsoft Office and Excel, artificial intelligence, 3D design software such as Revit, AutoCAD and SolidWorks, and accounting software.
Right, so that's digital. So if we move on to green skills and occupations. So in 2024, well over a third of people, 37% of people working in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough were in occupations affected by the green transition, the transition to a low carbon economy, well above the England average of below a third, 29%. And job postings requesting green skills rose by 3% in the 6 months to April of this year, against the 13% fall in other job postings. They were also 25% higher than the 6-monthly average for the past 10 years, while other job postings were 18% below average. So we're getting a picture here of a part of the economy that really is drawing in workers and workers with skills relevant to the green transition. The most requested green skills include waste management, water treatment, environmental health and safety, and ecology. Construction and blue-collar sectors have the highest shares of workers in green occupations, with agriculture leading at 79%. Pipe fitters are projected to be the fastest growing green occupation by 2031, followed by programmers and software developers. Green jobs increasingly require non-green skills, such as project management, risk analysis, and data analysis, and we can see that in the way that job descriptions have evolved for green jobs, and that's something we look at. And the University of Cambridge is the top recruiter of green skilled workers, and that's followed by Anglian Water, the Environment Agency, NHS, Mott MacDonald, and the British Antarctic Survey.
Okay, so we've got some charts now to highlight the increased demand for green skills across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So new data on the number of people employed in jobs affected by greening show that in 2024, over 1/3, so 37% of people working in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough were employed in these occupations, compared to less than 29% across England, and with rates above 40% in South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge. And over the past 5 years, the number of people employed in these occupations has grown by 19%, compared to an 11% fall across the rest of the labour market. And in terms of job postings requesting specialist green skills, these follow the trend across the rest of the labour market until early 2022. And they then increased strongly for a year while other job postings fell. And over the past 6 months, job postings requesting green skills also increased by 13% by 3% against a 13% fall across other job postings, and also remained 25% higher than the long-term average, while other job postings were 18% below average. So this does suggest that demand for green jobs is holding up well within a weaker labour market.
And just finally on to soft skills. So these are those sort of cross-cutting skills that are relevant in almost every job. Soft skills dominate employer needs in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's job market. And the particular soft skills that dominate are communication, management, and customer service. These lead the market. So over the past 5 years, the top 9 most requested skills in the region were all soft skills, led by those 3 I just said there. And these consistently rank as top skills across all local authority areas. Other highly requested soft skills include being detail-oriented, sales, planning, leadership, and research. Occupation-specific soft skills vary, but communication is universally dominant across all sectors and job types. And research identifies 6 essential employment skills for 2035. So these are collaboration, communication, creative thinking, information literacy, organising, planning and prioritising, and problem solving and decision making. So Hannah, if you take over.
So this chart shows the top 25 skills requested in job postings in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough over the past 5 years, with soft skills highlighted in purple, specialised skills in orange, and basic skills in blue. So you can see that the top 9 have all been soft skills, with communication being by far the most requested skill, followed by management and customer service. And if we look at the top skills requested by occupation, communication has been the most requested skill in 20 of the 25 occupational groups, with management being the most requested skill in managerial occupations, teaching the most requested among teaching and educational professionals, sales and customer service skills among sales occupations, and unsurprisingly, customer service skills within customer service occupations. But for all others, whether it be skilled trades, professional occupations, caring occupations, admin occupations, etc., communication is by far the most in-demand skill.
So we're coming towards the end of the of our presentation before the next session. But one more thing quickly to talk about before we kind of open it up for some Q&A ahead of Andrea's section. So one of the things we do in each report is set out which kind of areas of the labour market really interest us as focused areas of research. So these are usually things that where there is a lack of data, or where there's a real kind of need for greater insight because there's something going on that we need to understand a bit better. And we update these every quarter, although a core of them have remained consistent over the last year. So here they are, the sort of top 10 areas that we are really thinking about right now, and try to add some insight into our reports on that. But I'll pick out a few that perhaps have been picked up a bit in this presentation. So the first is the impact on future digital skills demand from recent advances in AI and other industry developments. So you'll have picked up some of the kind of negative numbers that we talked about for recruitment into digital roles, even though across the labour market as a whole, demand for basic digital skills and actually for digital occupations remains strong if you look at the level of them. There are some trends there in recruitment that look a bit more negative if you look at things recently. So we know that some of that is due to global decisions by some of the major tech companies to unwind over recruitment, or what they see as over recruitment during the pandemic. But we also hear that AI has had an impact on certain roles across the tech sector, particularly at the entry level. So we want to understand that a bit better. And we had the event at the end of last year in Cambridge where we discussed that in a workshop format. So we're continuing to look at that in a bit more detail. The shortage of care workers as well is a big one. You know, it really comes through in the data. And labour market exclusion and poor outcomes for young people, particularly in Finland, and some of the more recent trends in Peterborough as well are things that we're looking at really closely. And of course, the decline in employer training to low levels, especially for instruction in new technology. So what's behind that? Are we failing to pick up some things that are going on? We're really interested in those things. So that's just a quick summary of some of the things we're thinking about at the moment.
It's now hopefully a pleasure to hand over to Andrea, if she's been able to get the technology functioning. I can see microphone and camera both live. So Andrea, really pleased to have you with us today as the Assistant Director for Skills and Employment across the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Charlotte, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to attempt to share some slides just to kind of give some context to the points that I'm going to make this morning. So are they sharing?
They're coming through now. They just need to go into presenter mode now.
Yep. Okay.
You're good to go, Andrea. We can see.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. So it is a pleasure to be here this morning, and really great to continue working so closely with the Chamber on the skills agenda. The Chamber is our kind of recognised employer representative body across the region, representing the local skills improvement plan. And we've got a very strong relationship with them, and we will continue to do so, hopefully, in the next iteration of the LSIP that comes through. Really enjoyed Mike and Hannah's presentation this morning, kind of really highlighting some of the key concerns and worries that we've got across the combined authority area. But what I hope to kind of illustrate through the next couple of slides is some of the work that we're doing at a strategic level to try and counter some of those key challenges, and hopefully you'll be able to understand some of the programmes that as employers you could benefit from, or that you could share with other wider colleagues and employers if you're working in a kind of economic development capacity as well. So just a bit of context about skills and growth at the combined authority. So as a mayoral combined authority, we have the strategic kind of leadership role for skills across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And our role is really to work across not only local and national policy, but also through a range of interventions regionally that really drive the development of talent pipelines into some of our key sectors, but also to tackle sort of inequalities across the kind of social health and educational sphere. So this slide just gives a summary of some of the key sort of priorities and pieces of work that we're focused on at the Combined Authority. And I just want to draw some of these out for your benefit today. So first one being the management of the Devolved Adult Skills Fund that we manage across the region. And I've got a slide which I'll share with you that really talks about the kind of impact of that devolved funding and how we work with providers across the region to make sure that the skills offering that exists across the region is as aligned as far as possible to the needs of our employers. And we do that with best of intentions and by using a lot of the data that we've seen this morning. We also kind of work at a national level with the Department for Education, and the establishment of Skills England is something that we are woven into as a group of mayoral combined authorities across the country. And obviously Skills England are taking the lead in looking at what the national skills priorities are, while we take the lead in looking at what the local skills priorities are for our region. So that's a key piece of work. The other thing to kind of reference is some emerging work around the Get Britain Working Plan. And again, this is something that we'll be leading as a combined authority across the patch, which is really looking at tackling some of those concerns we saw in the slides around rising numbers of NEET young people and also rising numbers of economic inactivity and the impact that's having on employers in terms of long-term sickness and people falling out of work due to that. That's a big concern. And we're looking at what we can do locally through the delivery of a programme called Connect to Work that will work directly with employers to support them with trying to retain the workforce if there are workers that are at risk of dropping out due to health conditions. So what additional adjustments can be made and how can employers get support financially with that. Another big programme across the region is the fact that we are one of 8 places across the UK that are trailblazing the Youth Guarantee. Now, when we look at NEET data, you've looked at 16 and 17-year-olds, and beyond 18, currently across England, there's no statutory body responsible for those young people unless that young person is signing on at a job centre or has a learning difficulty or disability and has an education, health and care plan. And the government are trying out new ways of looking at addressing that concern by putting mayoral combined authorities in place to be that statutory body responsible for tracking and monitoring those young people, but also making sure that there is a systems approach in place to support them to enter employment. So that's not only working with young people themselves, but also with employers and wider stakeholders to move that work forward. And that's a big priority for us at the moment as we spend the next few months up until March of next year trailblazing activity in that space and developing what not only local policy would look like, but also informing national policy, working with the Department for Education and Work and Pensions. Another key part of the services that we kind of operate through our Growth Works with Skills hub at the moment is around brokerage. We administer a local apprenticeship levy sharing scheme. So we work with big employers such as Amazon and John Lewis, Aldi, etc., who have spare levy. And we help administer that so that employers locally can benefit from some of that levy share. And that is a piece of work that we're looking at in terms of, well, what's that going to look like when it changes to the growth and skills levy? Because if there's capacity in the system against apprenticeship levy, we're interested to see what it would look like when there might be capacity around a skills perspective as well, the more broader kind of qualifications. And across the kind of policy development piece, we work very closely with the Department for Education and Work and Pensions to develop local policy. And through our powers of devolution, we do have a number of freedoms and flexibilities to be able to tweak things regionally so that it's better, it's a better fit for what we need in that space. And that's something that we do with a great amount of appreciation with the flexibility, because it does enable us to adjust funding rules, regulations, and make sure that we're aligning funding to specific activities to drive skills and growth. In terms of the kind of ecosystem that we work across, that kind of list on the left-hand side is not exhaustive. There are multiple organisations that we work with across the kind of place to try and bring together a cohesive system across the skills agenda. And just a reiteration there of the kind of balancing act that we continually try to achieve, which is around driving growth and productivity, but also tackling inequalities at the same time. And how do we do that so that the place as a whole kind of benefits from its economic success is a key priority for us. This next slide just showcases one strand of the work which is linked to our adult skills funding. So this just gives you an overview of its reach. So this reflects on academic year 23-24 and demonstrates that during that year, the authority commissioned a total of 24 skills providers to deliver provision across the region, and that managed to reach over 12,000 adults. Which will be across a range of skills initiatives, from basic skills in maths, English and ESOL through to level 3 technical qualifications for specific sectors. And in that year, we did see a significant increase in the number of level 3 enrolments compared to the previous year, which was very pleasing to see, because it was demonstrating higher levels of participation of adults looking to upskill at that more advanced level. And its reach managed to make sure that we were tackling not only adults that were unemployed, but we are also working with adults that are employed. And that is something that's key to note as we really focus on working more with employers around that employer investment in skills and how we can drive in-work progression as well as entry into employment through upskilling and reskilling. Just a couple of things to note on the kind of share of spend. A significant proportion of that funding goes to Peterborough, as obviously an area with quite high numbers of economic inactivity and skills needs. But then it's shared across the rest of Cambridgeshire fairly equally, but with key focuses on Fenland, and also looking at how we ensure that we're meeting the needs of those places in that balancing act of tackling inequalities and also driving skills. And then finally, I'll just end on this slide, because this just gives a real snapshot of the work we're doing in a matrixed way in terms of looking at how we help to support, implement national strategy, and also lobby and influence national strategy, which is a lot of my day job, spent in meetings with DfE officials, really looking at what things are looking like and how things are going to play out. And a particular one that we're focused on at the moment is the post-16 education and skills strategy, which the Department for Education will be launching towards the end of this month. That's a strategy that we've been helping to co-produce with Skills England and DfE since probably October time last year, and really looking at how there needs to be regional nuances in that strategy, and really championing the fact that there is a definite disconnect at the moment in terms of the government's ambitions to drive growth and productivity, yet they are cutting back on the amount of funding available to support skills development, and in particular adult skills. So as a combined authority, we took a 3% cut on the money that we get for adult skills in our funding, and nationally there was also a 3% cut. As we see the government try and reprioritise some skills interventions aligned to specific sectors, and in particular they're very focused on construction skills and house building in particular. And we're talking to them at the moment as well around what a technical excellence college might look like across the east of England, specifically focused on construction, and how that would support our region's ambitions around house building, but also the wider infrastructure needs. We've touched on this morning the growth and skills levy and apprenticeship reform, and you're right, there is a real lack of transparency at the moment coming through from government. I think they are still toying with some of the key interventions that they're looking to introduce in these new policies, but something that we as a combined authority have definitely lobbied is the requirement for greater employer support and incentives and support for employers to actually engage in putting more of their workers through training and development, recognising that only costs money, but it also takes time out of the business. So how can the government support that? And one of the suggestions that we've put forward to government is to consider things like corporation tax relief, so that some of that funding could be used to backfill posts and to support additional costs of training and development. Whether that comes through in the policy is yet to be seen, but hopefully we'll see more in that space in the next couple of weeks. In terms of our kind of local priorities, the Combined Authority is busy putting together its local growth plan. That will be a 10-year plan that looks at the key infrastructure and sectoral growth projections, and obviously skills and employment will be written large into that in terms of what we hope to see. And one of our key asks in our local growth plan will be around capital investment across our FE estates, not just to support things like maintenance and support of building development, but also making sure that they have the right technical infrastructure to deliver the skills that we need for the future. So that's a key priority. And we know LSIP 2 hopefully will be coming, and that will be a joint initiative between ourselves and the Chamber, which is fantastic, and we await statutory guidance from government on that. I've mentioned the Youth Guarantee, I've mentioned the Get Britain Working Plan. There is a strategic partnership with the Combined Authority with Homes England, very focused on the development of construction skills across the region. And a couple of other things to mention is around how we work more closely with employers around developing good work and making sure that employers can benefit from the range of interventions that we can provide through the authority and leverage in to the region from government. And we've heard today about this case study around the paid internship programme, and I'm really pleased to say that that is a programme that we're continuing to develop and continue to offer, and we will aim to offer many more paid internships across the next year, funded through the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer and also a continuation of shared prosperity funding. Other key things just to note around third sector grants, we're working really closely, not just with our FE sector and universities, but also with the voluntary and community sector, who play a key role in offering skills and support for individuals who need encouragement and support to access learning or to access employment. And so we have a range of support and provision available for them as well. And one key thing just to mention is around our regional careers hub. So through, again, external funding that we've leveraged in from government, we're able to provide not only support to schools, linking them with employers around employer engagement in the curriculum and looking at work experience and experiences of the workplace for young people, but also to commission an all-age careers service, which we do in partnership with Reed, and that is a free point of access available to any adult across the region who is looking for additional careers advice and guidance, which also covers the kind of questions around further skills development and career progression. So that's also helpful. So hopefully you can see an alignment there in terms of what we're seeing coming through in the data and how we're looking to align a lot of the activity that we do through the Combined Authority. But we're always really open to hear, especially from employers, anything that particularly needs addressing in any particular sector, so that we can look to make sure that we have a broader coverage as possible in this space.